Hey guys, tonight we begin in a place where sandals squelch through sun-baked mud. Clay walls lean slightly, as if tired of standing for millennia, and every breeze smells faintly of roasted grain, wet riverbank, and something definitely mammalian. Welcome to Sumer's shining city by the Euphrates. It's 3000 BCE, the moon is out, the canals glisten, and you're very much not prepared for what comes next. You're new here, obviously. The hem of your tunic is too clean, your beard, if you have one, is patchy, and your sandals squeak when you walk. Locals glance over from under thick eyebrows as they barter for onions, incense, or a suspiciously agitated goat. You don't speak the dialect fluently, but you nod a lot, which seems to help. Right now you're trying to find the city's temple complex, not for prayer, though that's technically encouraged, but because it's your new job site. You've been summoned for the bureaucratic dream gig of ancient Sumer, a temple clerk. That's right. No plowing, no carrying bricks in the sun, no goat wrestling. You get to sit indoors and do math on lumps of clay. Congratulations. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge past the city's outer stalls. A merchant loudly extols the softness of his sheep wool, while a kid tries to sneak a pomegranate off a cart. The streets aren't paved, but they are well worn, like a pair of favorite slippers. You pass homes made of sun-dried brick, some 2 stories tall, each packed snugly beside its neighbor, like they're gossiping. Finally, the ziggurat looms ahead. Not just a temple, it's the administrative hub, granary, and the closest thing this city has to a city hall. It's huge, tiered, and painted in what was probably a vibrant blue before the dust got ambitious. At the base, scribes come and go, some muttering, others balancing reed baskets filled with, you guessed it, clay tablets. Your welcome to this new role comes from a man with a frown so permanent it might be legally defined as property. He barely glances at you before thrusting a stylus into your hand, a wedge-tipped tool made of bone, and leads you to a quiet corner room lined with shelves. There are no books here, only trays full of small, slightly curved slabs of clay, hardened in the sun or baked in kilns, each carved with tidy, mysterious markings. This is your world now, and you are immediately overwhelmed. One scribe is copying yesterday's grain receipt. He sighs deeply, then carves a triangle wedge with the stylus, again and again. Another is trying to calculate how many goats equal a mina of silver, muttering curses that would have made a temple statue flinch. You, meanwhile, are asked to begin with the most thrilling of all tasks: inventory. Now, inventory in doesn't mean checking boxes. It means walking around a grain storehouse with a waxy board, keeping tally on how many baskets are full, which ones smell off, and which were nibbled by a particularly bold family of rats. You note the amounts in your head, then hurry back to scratch them into clay before the numbers slip away like barley through a sieve. Historians still argue whether these early clerks were literate in the way we think of literacy. Could they read long texts, or were they more like highly trained form fillers? What's clear is they were essential. Without them, temple economies would collapse under the sheer weight of uncounted dates and fish. And that's the real surprise. For all the myths and epic poems, what survives from ancient Sumer isn't heroism. It's math. It's lists. Receipts for livestock, oil, beer. Notes on who owes whom how much barley. It's oddly soothing in a way. Bureaucracy, it turns out, is one of the most durable things humans have ever invented. One tablet catches your eye. It's from last year and it documents a sheep transaction. 1 ewe, 2 rams, delivered to temple for midwinter feast. Simple enough, but on the reverse is a hastily scratched note. Sheep were no longer alive upon arrival. You try not to laugh, but someone nearby chuckles. Apparently the livestock courier had dropped the animals off near the wrong ziggurat. By the time they were found, a pack of city dogs had already claimed their festive feast. The clay tells it all. And now it's your job to tell it back. To the high priest, the treasurer, the gods, indirectly, and the tax enforcers. You are, in a way, the ancient world's answer to Excel. Without you, nothing adds up. Literally. But don't get cocky. One wrong wedge mark and a priest might show up at your door wondering why he only received 8 jars of beer instead of 10. Spoiler, he is not known for patience. Outside, the sun is setting. Inside the scriptorium, it never truly gets dark. Oil lamps flicker softly, illuminating the same squiggles that clerks just like you carved thousands of years ago. There's a comfort in the repetition. You press your stylus into clay and think, for just a moment, about how strange it is that receipts might be the only thing left of your life someday. But for now, you'll finish today's tablet, smooth out tomorrow's slab, and try not to mix up the sheep counting. You barely sleep your first night in Ur. The floor of your quarters is made of baked clay tiles that radiate the day's leftover heat well into the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, someone is playing a lyre. A dog barks at a goat, then the goat barks back. You give up trying to understand it. Morning comes quickly, ushered in by the shouts of grain workers and the unmistakable slosh of someone spilling beer from a reed bucket. You wrap yourself in your linen tunic and shuffle off to the ziggurat again. You're still not quite sure where the temple ends and the offices begin. They're sort of all squashed together in an architectural shrug. Today's task? You've officially been promoted, if we're being generous with the word, to temple granary clerk. It's not glamorous, but it's vital. You're in charge of keeping track of grain intake, output, and, most terrifyingly, redistribution to various temple staff. That means priests, dancers, guards, gardeners, and the occasional wandering astrologer who insists he needs barley for divination purposes. You stand beside the granary door with your stylus and a fresh slab of clay, still damp from the riverbank. One by one, farmers come in dragging reed baskets full of barley. Each delivery is carefully measured by volume, using a standard-sized container called a sila. You count how many sila go into the storage bin and record it with quick impressions. Wedge, triangle, triangle, slash. Done, next. It's repetitive, dusty, and surprisingly satisfying. You begin to see patterns. One farmer always brings slightly underfilled baskets and tries to distract you by singing loudly. Another smells like sheep and is oddly punctual. You learn to keep your back against the wall, just in case anyone tries to fudge their numbers with a sudden accidental bump. Historians still argue whether these transactions were strictly voluntary or semi-mandatory temple tributes. Either way, you're not in the business of ethics. You're in the business of grain. And here's the thing. Sumerian society ran on this stuff. Barley was currency, food, and offering. A worker's wages? Paid in grain. A priest's bonus? More grain. If you could trade enough barley, you could pretty much get anything. Beer, cloth, goats, even a massage if you knew the right corner of the market. There were no coins yet, just units of volume, carefully tracked by people like you who tried not to sneeze clay dust into their stylus hand. Your superior, an older scribe named Enlil Bani, who smells faintly of onions and disapproval, hands you a tablet from yesterday. It has a list of barley outflows from the storehouse to various temple sectors. Next to one line, he's added a tiny symbol, a foot with 3 toes. You point at it. You can't help but notice something. Every transaction, no matter how routine, is carefully recorded on clay. There are no shortcuts. Why? Because in a city of over 30,000 people, memory just doesn't cut it. And because people, whether 3000 BCE or yesterday, tend to lie when grain is involved. That's where receipts come in. Each day's transactions are carved into fresh tablets. Some are sun-dried, others, deemed important, are baked in a kiln, That makes them hard and durable. You accidentally drop one, and it clangs against the floor with a satisfying sound of permanent documentation. Congratulations. You've invented the first uneditable spreadsheet. But there's more to it. Receipts aren't just about memory, they're about accountability. Once you hand that barley over to the temple kitchen, it's on record. If it goes missing, the kitchen priest can't just shrug and say the rats ate it. No, there's a tablet. With your mark, with his mark. And if things get really out of hand, a seal from the temple's chief administrator. And here's a quirky detail for you. The Sumerians didn't just write receipts. They sometimes stored them inside hollow clay balls called bulla. These acted as sealed transaction records. If someone disputed a delivery later, you could smash the bulla open and check the tablet inside, like a bureaucratic piñata. You don't get to use those yet. You're still on flat slab duty. But one day, maybe. As the sun climbs higher, you trudge back and forth between the granary bins, the tally table, and the small scriptorium, where scribes organize receipts by category: incoming grain, outgoing barley, special distributions, and suspicious shortages. The 3-toe-foot column is getting alarmingly crowded. You pause for a moment. There's something almost meditative about it. The repetition, the weight of the stylus in your hand, the soft scratch of impressions on clay. You feel weirdly important. Every mark you make tells someone, sometime, how this city worked, how people fed each other, how gods got their offerings, how a single sheaf of grain might ripple out into 20 other stories. There's a gentle joke among clerks. The gods don't eat, but they still want receipts. And it's kind of true. Every temple feast has to be documented. Every priest's snack break. Every goat tithed in honor of the moon goddess. It all goes on clay. You wonder if anyone's ever written a receipt for the stylus itself. Outside, someone yells. You look out the window and spot a delivery gone wrong. A basket of barley has tipped into the canal. The young courier is gesturing wildly, claiming the basket was sabotaged. You shake your head and jot a quick note. By the end of the day, your fingers are sore, your shoulders ache, and you've memorized more numbers than you thought possible. You've also started to understand the Sumerian truth. No one really wants to track barley, but someone has to, or else the whole world turns to chaos. You tuck your latest tablet into a drawing tray and stare at it, quietly amazed. This tiny rectangle of clay contains an entire story: who gave what, when, why, and how much. A conversation, locked in baked mud, meant to last forever. And now, your shift is over. You stretch, yawn, and head back to your quarters, ducking under a laundry line and narrowly avoiding a chicken with a vendetta. Tomorrow, you'll count goats. But tonight, you dream in wedges. Morning fog clings low to the Euphrates as you make your way back to the ziggurat, sandals squelching slightly from last night's river mist. Today's job takes you away from the grain bins and toward the temple courtyard, where something infinitely more complicated awaits: debt records. You sit cross-legged on a reed mat beside Enlil Bani, who gestures toward a small, neat stack of clay tablets. "You're in luck," he says, without smiling. "It's repayment day." The first tablet reads like a soap opera. So-and-so borrowed 3 measures of barley and 1 goat in exchange for plowing help and a future basket of dates. That was 2 seasons ago. Today, he's due to repay the loan. But the goat? Tragically deceased. The barley? Late. The dates? Not yet ripe. Welcome to the tangled world of Sumerian IOUs. You record what's repaid and what's not. If someone defaults, the temple doesn't send muscle, at least not immediately. First, there's a new receipt, an update, a promise. The bureaucracy never ends, it simply reshuffles. The Sumerians didn't have a word for interest in the modern sense, but oh, did they understand the concept. A loan of barley might expect repayment with a little extra, sometimes in silver, sometimes in labor, sometimes in awkwardly shaped onions. Historians still argue whether these bonuses were standardized temple practice or just clever priestly improvisation. One quirky tablet lists repayment in the form of entertainment. You can't tell if that meant music, dancing, or a guy doing impressions of local goats, but someone signed off on it. And that's the crux of it all. Receipts were trust with proof. Everyone owed someone something, and without a clear record, society would collapse into a very noisy barter market. You can almost hear it. I gave you 2 ducks last week. No, those were geese. Lies. My cousin saw you stew them. With receipts, disputes became discussions. You'd pull the clay, check the symbols, and solve the matter without violence. Or, failing that, with just a mild insult and some side-eye. One man arrives breathless, hands trembling, clay still damp from being hastily written. He's just closed a deal. 2 cows in exchange for 6 months' fish deliveries to the temple kitchens. Seal it, he says, holding out the tablet. You pass it to Enlil-Bani, who squints. No date, he grumbles. The man winces, grabs the stylus, and carves the lunar cycle in the corner. Satisfied, Enlil-Bani presses the man's personal seal. A carved cylinder rolled over the clay, into the bottom. The impression shows a stylized lion fighting a bird. Dramatic? Yes, but it makes the tablet official. Sumerians loved their seals. Each one was unique, often passed down through families, carved from precious stones. You roll one seal across a practice tablet, marveling as the image unfolds, tiny as a thumbprint, yet sharp as a whisper. This, too, is part of your training. Receipts don't count without seals. It's not enough to write down the numbers. You need the person's mark, their identity, their metaphorical fingerprint. Midday brings a break, but no one really rests. There's always someone asking about a tablet, trying to negotiate a delayed repayment, or rereading an old receipt to make sure they weren't swindled. You sit under a fig tree in the courtyard, chewing on a stale flatbread and wondering what the official record would say about this moment. Clerk received insufficiently spiced rations, morale declining. That afternoon, you're handed a stack of backlogged debts. One is comically outdated. It promises repayment in the form of 10 bundles of reeds after the next full moon. But it's dated 3 years ago. No one ever followed up. You glance around. Should you track it down, or let it slide into obscurity, a debt swallowed by time? Historians debate whether Sumerians had formal debt forgiveness. Some think that kings occasionally wiped slates clean, especially during coronations or plagues. Others argue that these amnesties were rare and more symbolic than practical. What's certain is that debt was everywhere, and receipts were the only way to tame it. You notice something else, too. People treat the tablets with respect. Even the illiterate ones cradle them carefully, eyes scanning the symbols like trying to catch a tone of voice they can't quite hear. Clay may be humble, but it carries power. There's even a superstition among some of the older priests. Never destroy a tablet with your own name on it. Bad luck, they say. The gods don't forget numbers, even if people do. You're not particularly superstitious, but you do catch yourself gently setting each tablet down instead of tossing it into the basket. Late in the day, a woman in a fine wool shawl steps into the courtyard. She's a merchant, known for selling rare dyes. Her tablet is sleek, well inscribed. She wants a copy made, a duplicate in case of damage. Enlil-Bani nods and sets to work, carefully recreating the transaction. 2 sealed tablets, he mutters, just in case the donkeys get ambitious. You file her copy in a new clay envelope, seal it shut, and add it to the shelf. There are dozens there already, an entire wall of promises, trades, wages, and deliveries. The bureaucracy isn't glamorous, but it's quietly magnificent. As the sun begins to sink, the air turns golden. You lean back, tablet balanced on your knee, and think, these small slabs have outlasted empires. Someone 5,000 years from now might hold one of your receipts and squint at your handwriting. What will they think? Probably something like, "Today begins with a quiet thunk," the sound of a newly baked tablet hitting your desk with a bit too much enthusiasm. Enlil-Bani, as always, enters without knocking. "Delivery mix-up?" he mutters, pointing at the tablet. "Fix it." You take a look. It's a receipt for 3 sheep delivered to the temple kitchen by a man named Lugal-Ili. But the tablet reads, 2 sheep and 1 suspicious bundle. That last part is scribbled, as if the scribe had gotten tired or deeply confused mid-carving. You sigh. Another morning, another animal-related mystery. Before long, Lugal-Ili himself arrives, irate and gesturing wildly. "They were 3 sheep," he insists. "That suspicious bundle was one of them. She just had very small horns." You try to keep a straight face. The sheep in question had been mistaken for a sack of turnips. Happens more often than you'd think. This is where the true beauty of receipts comes in. They aren't just records. They're shields. Protection from clerical error, misremembering, or wool-based slander. Without them, the temple would drown in complaints, accusations, and lengthy arguments about goat fairness. You smooth a fresh tablet and begin again. You write carefully, correcting the numbers, and adding an extra note about distinct horn configuration. You're tempted to add a doodle of a sheep in protest, but resist. The clay is not your sketchbook, unless you're a very important priest with a flair for art. And you are not. As you write, you're interrupted by a young apprentice lugging a basket full of drying tablets from yesterday's market receipts. She plops them beside you and collapses on the nearest bench. "Clay's heavy," she groans. You nod. "So is bureaucracy." She laughs. She'll learn. The tablets are fascinating, each one a tiny economic drama. One documents a barter exchange. 2 ducks for 1 bronze razor, transaction witnessed by Tumal the potter. Another outlines a transaction for spices from Dilmun, traded through 3 middlemen, and 6 units of something that may or may not be licorice. Historians still debate how widespread Sumerian long-distance trade really was. Some say it stretched deep into India. Others claim it was mostly local, with a few flashy imports. But what's clear is that Sumerians tracked everything, meticulously. Even the name of the man who carried the cinnamon to the city gate. The market. There's an old joke in the scriptorium. 1 shekel gets you a receipt. 2 gets you a better memory. You're not sure how often it actually happens, but you've heard rumors of receipts with inflated grain counts, of seals switched when no one was watching. That's why the temple had official scribes. You. Trained, watched, judged, and sometimes mildly underpaid. Enlil-Bani, pausing by your desk, raises an eyebrow at a particularly ornate tablet. "This one's a mess," he says, pointing. "Too much stylus flourish. Someone's trying to impress a girl." You glance down. Indeed, the wedges are sharp, elegant, almost artistic. You can't help but smile. There's something oddly touching about romantic flair in barley accounting. Another tablet arrives from a merchant requesting a refund, an unusual case. His ox died 2 days after purchase, and he claims it was already doomed. The seller disagrees, citing an act of the gods. You draft 2 tablets, one recording the claim, the other the counterclaim. They'll be filed in the dispute tray, where most cases languish until both parties either forget or die of old age. Still, the point remains. Receipts weren't just records. They were stories. Every line you carve captures not only quantities and names, but personalities. Phrases like late but agreeable, smelled of onions, and refused to make eye contact show up in the margins. You wonder if future historians will read them and think, wow, ancient accountants were petty. And they'd be right. One peculiar case involves a temple cook who attempted to double count his lentil intake. He received 10 measures of lentils in the morning and again claimed the same in the afternoon. Fortunately, you spotted it. You pull out the earlier tablet, match the delivery date, and confront him with a casual, "Didn't we already feed your pots today?" He stammers. You raise your eyebrow. He leaves with only a half measure and an embarrassed nod. Score 1 for team receipt. The use of baked clay gives the Sumerians an advantage few civilizations could match: durability. Papyrus rots, parchment fades, but once fired, clay endures. That's why we know so much about them, not because they wanted to be remembered, necessarily, but because their paperwork refused to be forgotten. By now, your fingers are cramped from stylus grip, your nose is full of dust, and your hair smells vaguely of lentils. But you've handled trade disputes, clarified a sheep scandal, spotted a lentil scam, and admired a love-struck scribe's stylish flourishes. You lean back, watching the late afternoon sun catch the drying rows of tablets outside. They look like a field of sun. Maybe someone, 5,000 years from now, will read your barley allocation note and smile at the little triangle you accidentally carved sideways. Maybe they'll imagine you here, hunched over clay, chasing down missing sheep and miscounted onions. Maybe they'll even think you were kind of funny. You start the morning in the worst possible way, by tripping over a stack of freshly baked tablets. They scatter like brittle toast across the scriptorium floor. A few crack, one splits clean in half, and your pride shatters louder than the clay. And Lil Bonnie looks up from his desk with a sigh deep enough to echo down the Euphrates. "Markets again today?" he says. "Try not to destroy the evidence." You mumble something about gravity and collect what dignity you can, tucking the least damaged tablets into a reed basket. Today, your assignment is to observe and record transactions in the outer bazaar, the real commercial pulse of Ur, where scribes in silver meet sausages and sandals. The market is alive by mid-morning. You dodge 2 geese and a man loudly advertising freshly scraped fish guts for temple compost. Stalls line the sun-baked plaza, their awnings flapping lazily in the breeze. People shout, haggle, sing, and, of course, argue. Your task is simple. Monitor transactions involving temple-sanctioned goods, grain, wool, oil, and the occasional sacred donkey. In theory, every trade gets logged. In practice, most people try to avoid you. A woman selling dates offers you one if you look the other way on a misweighed bundle. You decline. She shrugs and offers a second one. You hesitate. This is where it gets tricky. Sumerians had units of measure for everything: The shekel wasn't just money, it was a unit of weight, about 8 grams of silver. A mina was 60 shekels. A talent, 60 minas. Except, not always. Local variations happened, and guess who gets blamed when the conversion math is off? You. You wander stall to stall, keeping your clay slab balanced in one hand and your stylus in the other. A man trades a handful of silver dust for 3 jugs of sesame oil. You record it. Another exchanges wool for 3 baskets of dried fish and throws in a joke about his wife's cooking. You record that too. Well, the transaction part. Historians still argue whether the market prices were regulated by the temple or fluctuated freely based on supply and demand. Probably both. Some days barley was cheap. Other days one sneeze in a grain bin and prices doubled. Quirky fact. Some traders carried their own pre-recorded receipts, ready to be updated with details later. Like walking around with a blank check. The temple hated it. You hate it. It defeats the whole point. But you admit, grudgingly, it's clever. By midday, you've documented 14 trades, 3 price disputes, and 1 suspicious jug of fish sauce that may or may not contain something still moving. You note that down with a discreet, questionable contents, buyer unbothered. You pass by a bearded man sitting beside a pyramid of onions. He's arguing with a customer over the size of the bulbs. You approach just in time to hear, "These are royal onions, fit for a king's stew." The buyer scoffs. "These are temple onions at best." You record it all, wishing someone would write a short play about this onion debate. Maybe they will, in cuneiform. Later, a fight nearly breaks out between 2 traders over a fake weight. You step in, hold up your tablet like a tiny shield, and suggest they weigh it on the official temple scale. Both grumble but agree. The weight turns out to be rigged, hollowed out and filled with sand. Scandalous. You confiscate the fake and record the incident. Merchant attempted deception with counterfeit shekel weight, claimed innocence, cursed extensively. This is why receipts mattered so much in Sumerian marketplaces. They created a shared language, a common ground. You didn't have to trust the trader. You trusted the tablet, the seal, the weight of baked clay. Even the gods supposedly appreciated this structure. One temple hymn thanks the god Enlil for measuring rightly, like barley beneath the stylus. A divine nod to good accounting. Bless your dusty heart. As the sun dips westward, the stalls begin to fold up. You count your notes. 23 transactions, 4 disputes, 2 complaints about goat smell, and 1 instance of payment pending due to absence of mule. You head back toward the ziggurat. Tablet basket balanced carefully, careful not to trip over another pile. Enlil Bani is waiting. "Anything unusual?" he asks. You pause. "There was a fish jug that blinked at me." He grunts. "We'll need a new fish supplier." You spend the next hour copying field tablets into cleaner versions, correcting spelling, clarifying chicken math, and applying the proper seals. Your handwriting is improving. Your stylus hand feels permanently claw-shaped. And just when you think your day is done, a young boy bursts into the scriptorium with a crumpled receipt, claiming he's owed 1 small goat and a handful of raisins. You glance at the tablet. It's real. Issued last week. The clerk nods. "Raisin boy again. We forgot him yesterday." You walk him to the storeroom, check off the items, and hand him a fresh tablet to confirm delivery. He grins and waves. Another happy customer. You can't help but smile either. Somewhere in a future museum, a clay tablet with a goat and a snack on it might be cataloged under Ancient Sumerian Trade Practices. But to you, it's just another Tuesday. You place the day's work in the archive tray, blow a little dust off your tunic, and step out into the cooling air. Another day of chaos, bartering, and fish sauce behind you. Another neat stack of baked memories. It's Silver Day, which sounds exciting until you realize it means sitting for hours, hunched over scales, while every merchant in the district insists their silver definitely weighs more than it looks. The temple uses silver as its base measure of value. Not coins, those don't exist yet, but raw silver dust, nuggets, and the occasional awkwardly flattened lump. Payments happen by weight, not face value. That means every transaction becomes a trust exercise and a math test. Your morning begins with a sleepy apprentice dragging a basket of verified weights. You double-check them. One is slightly off, possibly chipped during transport. You set it aside. A mismatched weight is no small thing. It could cascade into weeks of miscounted exchanges. Your first visitor is a copper merchant. He's paying his annual temple fee in silver. The amount is large, 5-. You watch as he pours silver dust from a knotted leather pouch onto the balance scale. It glitters under the morning light, oddly beautiful. He leans in, hopeful. It's short, by half a shekel. You raise an eyebrow. He scratches his beard. Maybe the gods took a tithe mid-pour, he offers. Maybe you bring more silver, you reply, marking the amount with a triangle and a sigh. Historians still argue whether silver was commonly used for everyday purchases or mostly reserved for large deals. Some records suggest temple economies favored barter, saving silver for fines, tribute, or sacred bling. Others say silver flowed more freely, just not into the hands of scribes like you. Still, it's not all dust and weights. You get to witness odd trades. A brewer pays his barley dues in silver, but insists on accompanying the payment with a single carved figurine of a frog. For luck, he says, placing it carefully beside the scale. You allow it. What harm could a frog do? As the day rolls on, you notice the subtle tricks traders use, blowing air gently on the scale to nudge the weight, sneaking a thumb under the pan when they think you're distracted, or using damp silver that sticks and clumps, making it look heavier. You've seen it all, and you write it all down. One peculiar case involves a weaver who shows up with silver beads strung onto a bracelet. She claims it's exactly 1 shekel. You frown. It's beautiful, but impractical. You place the bracelet on the scale. She's right. Dead on. You ask why she strung it. So it doesn't get lost in my goats. Fair. You record the bracelet as payment, noting the added detail. Acceptable, but annoying. You're developing your own style of commentary now, slipping in little notes that make future readers smile or squint in confusion. Here's a fun tidbit. Some receipts mention shaved silver, implying that unscrupulous dealers would shave slivers off their payments before delivery. Tiny thefts, nearly invisible. To counteract this, some temples began requiring sealed silver packets. You haven't seen one yet, but you dream of it. A day without arguing over dust? Paradise. Midday heat brings a lull. You stretch your legs and walk to the scale house, where official weights are kept under watch. They're shaped like ducks. You're not sure why, but they are. And they are very serious ducks. Heavy, precise, and guarded like treasure. The keeper of the weights, a man named Ursin, is deeply suspicious of everyone and speaks only in grunts. You show him a trader's request to recalibrate his scale. He grunts 3 times, checks the request, then carefully adjusts the weight using a tiny chisel. Silver Day is also when stories surface. A priest whispers to you that someone's been stockpiling silver in clay jars buried behind the temple stables. Another clerk claims a rival scribe has been under-recording repayments and pocketing the change. You nod, listen, and record none of it. Gossip isn't your job. Receipts are. But you can't help feeling intrigued. The line between scribe and detective gets blurry sometimes. A courier arrives in the late afternoon with a sealed bulla, a clay envelope containing a silver transaction tablet. You carefully crack it open like an egg. Inside is a pristine tablet, 2 minas of silver, paid by a high-ranking merchant, witnessed by a priest, sealed twice. You smile. Perfect record-keeping. The kind of tablet that makes a scribe's heart flutter. Historians wonder how much autonomy temple clerks had in accepting or rejecting payments. Based on the grumbling you hear daily, probably quite a bit. You're the filter between chaos and order, between silver and salt. Toward the end of the day, a boy brings in a tiny nugget of silver in a rag. It's a temple fine, paid by his uncle for shouting at a goat during a religious procession. Apparently, the goat was sacred and sensitive. You note it down, then write, 1 shekel paid in apology. Goat remains unimpressed. Even you have to laugh. The sun hangs low when you finish the last tablet. Mark the final seal and stretch your aching fingers. The day's clay is drying neatly in rows, each tablet carrying silver's silent weight. You watch them harden slowly. The math is locked in now. No arguments, no bribes, just baked truth. You walk past the duck weights on your way out. It begins with a bleat. Not just any bleat either. This one is unusually high-pitched, with a kind of dramatic flair that suggests either extreme enthusiasm or deep regret. You poke your head out the scriptorium door and find the source. A goat, tied loosely to a palm tree, eyeballing a basket of figs like it's plotting a heist. Welcome to Livestock Day. You're stationed near the animal pens behind the temple kitchens, stylus in one hand, a slightly warped clay tablet in the other. Your mission? Record all animal donations, loans, and transfers, especially those made to or from the temple. Because if you thought barley math was tricky, try counting animals that move. This isn't just fluff work. Goats, sheep, cattle, and even pigs play a vital role in temple economy. They're offerings, sources of milk, meat, and manure. They're status symbols, trade goods, mobile assets, and occasionally, escape artists. The first delivery is smooth. 2 ewes and a ram, documented with an existing receipt. You verify their hoof brands. Yes, they branded hooves. Check their condition, and mark the tablet with the appropriate signs. Done. Then comes the trouble. A man drags in a goat with lopsided horns and insists it's the same one from last month's loan. You pull up the record. The tablet says, white goat with symmetrical horns, calm demeanor. This goat is beige and clearly plotting something. You squint. He sweats. Where's the original goat? You ask. He shrugs. Maybe she had personal growth. You scribble, return disputed, animal inconsistent with original receipt, possible goat swap, pending investigation. Historians still argue whether livestock returns were always this fluid. Some suggest people used receipts more as suggestions than obligations. Others argue for stricter enforcement, especially when the temple was involved. Either way, you start to suspect half the animals here have false identities. To prevent confusion, you begin sketching tiny pictures of animals in the margins of your tablets. It's not standard practice, but it helps. Your drawings are abstract. One clerk peers over your shoulder. Is that a goat? Or a very aggressive cloud, you reply. It's not just goat swaps you deal with. Some animals arrive with receipts claiming divine purpose, to be sacrificed during moonrite, or used in divinatory entrail reading. You log them carefully, though you privately hope to avoid the entrail sessions. Today, you learn the Sumerians had specific terms for different animal transactions: nigun for loans, shuba for deliveries, and nam-erin for herd inventories. You don't speak fluent Sumerian. You gently prod the animal. It wheezes. "I'll record this," you say, "but don't expect a feast invitation." You spend midday reorganizing the animal tablet shelf, which now includes categories like current herd, pending returns, questionable condition, and miscellaneous hoofed beings. You feel proud of that last one. Bureaucracy meets creativity. Then there's the matter of animal theft. One receipt describes a missing calf last seen grazing near temple stairs. It's been reported stolen, but some clerks whisper it was liberated by a rival scribe who owed meat to the kitchen. You don't comment. You just file the tablet under probable nonsense and continue. And then comes the bribe. A local shepherd approaches you with a lamb tucked under one arm and a very hopeful smile. He wants his late fees forgiven on a previously borrowed ox. You raise an eyebrow. He lifts the lamb. You cross your arms. He places a small wedge of cheese on your tablet. You look him dead in the eye and say, "Nice try." He sighs, takes back the lamb, and slinks away. The cheese stays. You pretend not to notice. Receipts aren't just transactional, they're political. Each one is a tiny battleground between memory, convenience, and truth. You're not just counting livestock, you're guarding the integrity of the city's divine balance sheet. Even the gods, apparently, keep records. Some temple tablets reference divine debts, offerings owed to deities for past favors. One notes, 2 rams owed to Enki for successful rain, delayed due to hoof injury. You don't know whether Enki accepted the excuse, but the ram eventually showed up, looking very confused. By late afternoon, you're filthy. Clay dust, goat hair, the smell of sheep sweat, and bureaucratic stress. You wash your hands in the canal and take a moment to admire your pile of tablets, each a tiny truth, solid and sealed. A courier delivers one last message. A priest wants an update on the temple's total animal holdings. You sigh and start the count. Current numbers: 31 goats, 3 questionable, 12 sheep, 2 loud, 4 pigs, 1 too clever, 1 cow, borrowed, overdue, 3 donkeys, unionizing? You write it all down, you sign it, you seal it, and you collapse onto your bench, exhausted but triumphant. Not everyone can say they counted a small zoo and made it legally binding, but you can. You awaken with a slight headache and the lingering smell of goats still clinging to your tunic. But today, mercifully, is a day away from livestock. Today, you're assigned to something arguably more chaotic: the beer records. Specifically, you're in charge of logging temple worker rations. Chief among them, beer. Yes, beer. In Sumer, it's not just a beverage, it's a currency, a morale booster, and a borderline religious experience. The temple employs a lot of people: brewers, cooks, scribes, cleaners, door attendants, gardeners, musicians, dancers, and a man whose entire job appears to be bell ringer with attitude. And every one of them is owed their daily ration of beer. You arrive at the ration depot with a freshly shaped tablet and find the place already humming with activity. Clay mugs clink, barrels burble, and someone is singing an extremely off-key hymn to Ninkasi, the goddess of brewing. You suspect he's had a few servings too many. A clerk hands you yesterday's tablet to compare against. You glance over the numbers. 24 half rations for potters, you say. The clerk shrugs. They said it was a heavy kiln day. You begin taking roll. Each worker approaches, receives their mug, and signs off by pressing a thumbprint or seal onto the moist tablet surface. It's a rhythmic procession. Pour, mark, repeat. And then there's Bazi. Everyone knows Bazi. He's technically employed as a temple gardener, though no one's seen him near a plant in weeks. Today, he tries to claim a double ration. You raise the tablet. It says here you missed yesterday's shift. He grins. I was communing with the sacred date trees. You raise an eyebrow. He tries again. Ninkasi visited me in a dream. She demanded I pre-hydrate. You sigh, record a note. Attempted spiritual exemption for missed work. Denied. 1 mug only. Historians still debate how formalized these beer rations were. Some tablets are exacting, listing daily portions down to the sila, about a liter. Others are vague, suggesting the process depended on local customs and clerical mood. Either way, you're the mood today, and Bazi is not getting his extra pint. There's something oddly beautiful about the ration system, though. It's egalitarian in its way. Laborers, priests, even you, everyone gets a measure of beer. Not strong beer, mind you. It's more like a hearty, porridgey liquid meal, but it keeps people fed, soothed, and just cheerful enough to keep the system running. You record a weaver's portion, then a scribe's, then a cook's. One delivery woman insists her beer yesterday tasted unsettled. You nod sympathetically and note, claims effervescent, has figs and a hint of juniper, he adds, then winks. We're calling it divine gassy favor. You suppress a snort and write, experimental batch for celebratory rite. Warning, fizzy. Nearby, another brewer is writing his own receipt. It's unusually long and poetic. You read over his shoulder. It begins, a drink for the gods, a sip for the weary, a barrel for the brave. You lean in. You can't fit that on 1 tablet. He smirks. It's a limited edition. You note the brew's ingredients, batch number, and delivery quantity to the temple storeroom. It's surprisingly complex. This isn't just beer. It's a social contract in liquid form. Receipts track who brewed what, when, with which grains, for which event. If the beer is spoiled, there's a tablet. If someone hoards it, another tablet. If it mysteriously disappears before the festival, oh, so many tablets. By afternoon, the ration line slows, and you help with cross-checking old records. 1 tablet catches your attention, a batch from 3 years ago recorded as reserved for the Eclipse Festival. But there's a note. Spilled during loading, smelled divine, poured for the grass spirits. You grin. Bureaucracy meets poetry. Another oddity, a receipt for beer delivery to 10 workers and 1 guest from Elam. No further detail. You wonder who this mystery guest was and whether they liked their beer slightly chewy. You ask the head brewer about it. Oh, that Elamite fellow, he says. He drank with both hands. Never seen anyone so enthusiastic. You log the anecdote for the archives. As the day winds down, Bazi returns, this time offering to help clean in exchange for another ration. You remind him that cleaning is also a job that comes with its own beer. He pouts and leaves, muttering about ungrateful gods. You double-check your records before closing. 72 rations distributed, 3 disputes, 1 dancing cook, 0 explosions. A successful day. You smooth the final tablet and place it gently in the drying rack. The scent of barley mash lingers in your nose. Somewhere behind you, someone begins to sing again. off-key, loud, possibly drunk. You smile. In Sumer, receipts don't just count, they speak. Of work, of fairness, of community, of people showing up, day after day, for their measure of warmth and worth, poured into a clay mug and sealed with a thumbprint. And you're the one who makes sure they get what they earned. And you are summoned early, too early if you're honest, by the sound of shouting near the ziggurat steps, loud, urgent voices. You groggily throw on your tunic and shuffle toward the commotion, stylus in your belt, tablet case under your arm. You're not even halfway to the steps when you hear the two worst words in Sumerian accounting: annual audit. The temple accountants, in all their joyless glory, have arrived. These are not your everyday scribes. These are the elite. They walk in pairs, carry double-length tablets, and wear expressions like they've just smelled a spoiled goat. Their robes are immaculately pleated. Their sandals make no sound. It's deeply unsettling. You're corralled into a chamber lined with dried tablets, baskets of sealed receipts, and a single dusty stool, your audit throne. Your job? Defend your numbers. They start with the grain records. You retrieve 3 months' worth of tablets, including the one with the questionable barley odor you tried to forget. The auditors inspect each tablet like it's forged in gold, squinting at the cuneiform as if it personally offended them. "This wedge," one says, pointing with a long manicured fingernail, "is smudged." "That was the rain day," you reply. "Humidity made the clay grumpy." He scribbles a note on his own tablet. You try not to peek, but you're pretty sure it says possible sass. The temple audits everything: grain in, grain out, livestock transactions, silver weight logs, beer rations, and even the record of how many styluses have gone missing this quarter. 6. One of them definitely fell down a crack between the bench and the archive shelf. You're still mourning it. You produce tablet after tablet, like a magician pulling doves from under their tunic. The auditors grunt occasionally. Approval, disappointment, indigestion, unclear. One moment of drama arises when an older auditor questions the totals in your goat ledger. You double-check, then triple-check. Ah, there it is. Someone tallied an overdue return twice. Clerical error, you admit. Corrected here. You hand him the follow-up tablet. He blinks, nods once, and moves on. Victory. Historians still argue how centralized these audits were. Some believe each temple was fairly autonomous, with occasional inspections from royal scribes. Others suggest that these audits happened with the kind of regularity that made scribes everywhere sweat through their wool. Either way, it's happening now, and you're in the hot seat. The auditors move on to the tax records. You try not to roll your eyes. Nothing kills a good nap like temple axes. Yes, taxes existed, not in coins or paperwork, but in expected deliveries: grain, livestock, silver, labor hours. If you had land, you owed part of your harvest. If you ran a craft, you owed goods. If you just existed, sometimes you still owed something. And the receipt. You present the latest batch of tax payment tablets, complete with debtor names, goods received, and even a few delightful notations like, "refused at first, but came back crying." It's important to capture the emotional texture of tax season. One tablet catches the auditor's eye. It lists an unusually large delivery of dates, and a side note that reads, "Family of 10. Claimed divine dream, absolved their debt." The auditors look at you. "I accepted half," you explain. "They also gave us 3 sacks of surprisingly good onions." A pause. One auditor scribbles, "Acceptable barter." You exhale. Audits weren't just about punishment. They were about balance. If the temple miscounted too far in any direction, Chaos could follow. Rations would fail. Offerings would fall short. The gods might get testy. You make your case clearly. The numbers balance. Mostly. There are 3 missing grain tablets from last month, possibly eaten by a rat, or misplaced under a stack of festival logs. You're not proud, but you present a summary instead. One auditor arches a brow, but accepts it. A delivery was marked as received, but the cook insists it never arrived. You suggest that perhaps the lentils were misplaced en route. The auditors nod slowly, then mark possible misrouting. Suggest lentil inventory. You nod back. A full bean recount. Understood. By afternoon, the light filters into the archive room, making the clay glint slightly. You're surrounded by the tools of your trade: styluses, seal impressions, broken tablets, slightly questionable math. It's oddly beautiful. One auditor stops to admire a shelf of particularly neat tablets. Yours? You nod. He grunts. A compliment, perhaps. The final review involves checking the seal archive, rows of tiny, baked impressions from every person who's ever officially traded with the temple. You match each to your recent receipts, confirming that, yes, that awkward seal with the dancing bird is, in fact, legitimate. No forgeries, no missing names. At last, the auditors roll up their tablet cases, press their personal seals onto a small review tablet, and leave without ceremony. One drops a small satchel of barley as he goes. His own tax payment, perhaps? You make a note. You lean back and exhale. You survived. The annual audit is done. The air smells like river mud and panic. A boy bursts into the scriptorium, panting, clay spattered, one sandal missing. "The pens are flooding," he wheezes. "The sheep are everywhere." You blink. And just like that, you're sprinting toward the temple's animal enclosures, tablet case bouncing, stylus clutched like a weapon. It rained last night, more than usual, and the Euphrates, ever dramatic, has decided to get involved. By the time you reach the scene, it's chaos. Water sloshes through the lower pens. Several goats have climbed onto a feed trough like a tiny panicked ship. A donkey is screaming at no one in particular. And the ledgers. Oh no, the ledgers. You wade in. The storage hut for the livestock receipts has taken in water, and several drying tablets are now slumping into useless goo. You recognize your own handwriting dissolving in the mud. A particularly detailed sheep inventory sighs and melts like overcooked porridge. You grab what you can, piling semi-wet tablets into a reed basket. Some can be salvaged. Others may be replaced with your best guess and a shrug. You make a mental note. Next year, elevated storage. Once the animals are secured and the water redirected via frantic ditch digging, you take stock of the damage. 9 tablets ruined, 3 others iffy. 1 completely unreadable, now just a soft brick with the faint impression of what might once have been a shekel sign. Historians still debate whether Sumerians had dedicated waterproof storage techniques. Some evidence suggests that particularly important documents were kept in clay jars or in higher chambers of the ziggurat. Others argue that everyone just hoped it wouldn't rain too hard. Either way, you're learning the hard way. You sit with Enlil Bani under the shade of a fig tree, going through what can be rewritten. He looks at one of the soft tablets and mutters, "This was the pig registry." You wince. The pigs are unaccounted for. You spend the rest of the morning reconstructing records from memory and partial fragments. One goat, possibly returned. 3 pigs, probably still alive. Donkey named Miku escaped into the canal. Should we issue a search receipt, you ask? Enlil Bani chuckles. Only if we want the donkey to sue us. He's joking, probably. You scrape fresh clay into usable slabs and begin again. Received 4 soggy sheep, wet but spirited. You try to keep the mood light in your notes, knowing full well that future scribes may read them during the next audit and wonder whether you were serious. You are. Those sheep are fair. He said it followed him home. Refused to return it out of politeness. You scribble, goat number 12, possibly abducted. Cross-reference with kitchen stew records. There's a like moment when a group of temple children, mini apprentices, help carry replacement tablets up to higher shelves. One of them proudly presents a drawing on a piece of wet clay. It's a goat, a rain cloud, and what appears to be you, holding a tablet and crying. Art imitates life. You bake the salvaged tablets in a temporary kiln, working in shifts with the other scribes. The smell of wet clay roasting under heat is oddly comforting, like the scent of rescue. The tablets are imperfect now, warped slightly, some harder to read, but they still tell the truth, or most of it. By afternoon, the pen floors are dry. The livestock has mostly returned itself, except for Miku the donkey, who continues to gallop freely through the streets like a one-animal parade. You sit with a fresh tablet and document the event. Flood event in animal pens, loss of 9 records, inventory estimated from memory and hoofprints, 1 donkey at large, name Miku, mood rebellious. You don't have to be poetic, but it helps. Historians might find this record one day and assume a major temple crisis. They won't smell the river, feel the panic, or hear the slap of goat hooves in puddles. But they'll have your clay etched, dried, preserved. A small moment of disaster turned permanent. There's a lesson in that. Later, back in the scriptorium, Enlil Bani starts copying the revised tablets into the main archive while you finish a summary report for the high priest. You keep it factual, but slip in one detail at the end. All animals now accounted for, except the donkey, who seems to be having the time of his life. You seal it with a flourish. Because even in crisis, receipts matter, especially the funny one. You wake up the next morning, still hearing the echo of donkey hooves in your dreams. But today, you're not chasing livestock or rewriting soggy receipts. Today, you're dealing with something quieter, stranger, and somehow even more maddening, ancient handwriting. The archives room smells like old clay, dried reeds, and a faint hint of sandalwood incense, probably someone's attempt to keep the dust spirits calm. It's dim in here, cool even in the Sumerian heat, and lined with low shelves filled with hundreds of tablets. Some are cracked, some are chipped, and some are impossible to read. Your job today? Review the older records, cross-check names, update inconsistencies, and, if possible, translate the older script into something readable by modern scribes. Simple. Except it's not. Because Sumerian cuneiform evolved. Early tablets look like someone pressed chicken feet into the clay. Later ones are neater, more angular. Some use logograms, a symbol for a whole word. Others use syllables. It's like switching from emojis to algebra mid-sentence. And worse, every scribe had their own style. Some had elegant, airy strokes. Others were heavy-handed and angry, carving each symbol like it owed them money. One clerk, nicknamed Bent Stylus, wrote everything slanted, like he was constantly scribbling during an earthquake. You squint at a particularly rough tablet. 3 ducks, you guess. No, that's bundles, says Enlil-Bani, appearing beside you with his usual ghost-like stealth. You tilt the tablet again. Looks like ducks. He shrugs. Maybe they were duck-shaped bundles. You log the entry with a question mark and move on. Historians still argue about how much scribal variation affected record accuracy. Some believe official templates were distributed to keep everything uniform. Others claim every temple just hoped for consistency and that a good scribe was worth more than an ox. The truth is, if your receipt couldn't be read, it might as well not exist. Which is why you're here, deciphering loops, wedges, and mystery triangles like some kind of ancient puzzle master. You come across a tablet marked with 3 seals, rare, likely a major trade deal, but the text is crammed, rushed, and scratched in places. You make out, delivery of 20 items, possibly figs or bricks. Figs and bricks are very different. You make a note to request material clarification from storage. One of your favorite fringe tablets reappears, badly cracked, written in what may be an extinct dialect, and stamped with a seal that depicts 2 sheep tap dancing under a crescent moon. No one knows what it means. Some say it was ceremonial, others think it's a prank. There's also the matter of broken tablets. Some are clean breaks, easy to glue together and read again. Others are disasters. Shattered corners, missing seals, or chunks eroded into oblivion. You sit cross-legged with a tray of fragments, matching edges like a dusty jigsaw puzzle. Half a receipt for barley, you mutter, turning one piece in your hand. The other half might have gone into a kiln or into someone's wall. You heard that rumor once. During a housing shortage, someone used receipt tablets as bricks. You hope that's not true, but also it's extremely efficient. A courier appears with a small bundle, newly unearthed tablets found near the edge of the city. You open it with reverence. The clay is lighter in color, sun-bleached. The writing is faint but elegant. A delivery record, it seems, for a wedding feast. 7 baskets of dates, 10 jars of beer, 3 haunches of goat, and 1 harpist. You smile. You'd go to that wedding. You update the archive ledger and begin carving a fresh, legible version of the record to file in the modern stacks. You add the date, known names, a new seal. The past, reinscribed for the present. And there's something magical in that. You're not just recording events, you're rescuing them. From mud, from fading, from forgotten styluses and eroded edges. Still, some tablets fight you. One is written in a left-handed wedge style, common in the southern city of Lagash. Everything's reversed. It gives you a headache. Another was clearly carved by someone using a stick instead of a proper stylus. The wedges are blunt, like they were smeared on with a goat hoof. You do your best. You transcribe what you can. And when all else fails, you summarize. Illegible record, possibly related to fish. Smells faintly of regret. Not all scribes are poets. Late in the afternoon, you find a tablet tucked behind a loose shelf brick. It's small, reddish, curved like a pocket mirror. The text is faint but clear enough. A personal note. I traded 1 kiss for a basket of onions. Worth it. You don't know who wrote it. There's no seal, no date. But you place it on your desk, clean it gently, and smile. Not all receipts are about barley. Some are about life. This morning, you're sent not to the granary, not to the market, not even to the goat pens, but to the weavers. You follow the winding side streets of Ur, stepping over half-dried laundry and dodging a boy rolling a hoop with a stick until you reach the textile quarter. It smells of lanolin, smoke, and warm dust. Women and a few men sit on low stools, spinning wool into thread, weaving it into cloth, and, most importantly for you, logging every scrap of it with a stylus and ruthless precision. The temple doesn't just receive offerings, it operates industries. Textile production is one of the biggest, and it's largely overseen by women, which is why, as you approach the central workroom, you are greeted by 3 sharp-eyed women and 0 pretense. "You're the new scribe," one asks. You nod. She doesn't nod back. Instead, she thrusts a small clay tablet at you. "Find the error in this." You glance down. It's a delivery record, 9 bundles of wool, 2 broken spindles, and a goat hair tunic that definitely wasn't listed in yesterday's count. You squint. "The goat hair bundle wasn't sealed," you point out. "Exactly," she says, pointing to another tablet. "And we don't accept anything without a seal, even if it smells divine." You're beginning to suspect the weavers might be the most organized group in the city. You settle in beside their main desk and begin reviewing the backlog of textile receipts. Some are beautiful, thin, elegant tablets with clean lines and stylized thread count markings. Others are, frankly, chaos. One receipt simply reads, "Cloth, so much cloth, don't ask." You carefully rewrite the ambiguous ones and double-check their seals. Most of the women here use signature cylinders engraved with images of sheep, scissors, or hands holding thread. One woman has a seal of a bird standing triumphantly on a loom. You do not ask questions. Historians sometimes underestimate the economic power of women in ancient Sumer, but the receipts say otherwise. Female heads of household appear regularly. Widows lease land, manage herds, and operate spinning workshops like seasoned CEOs. One woman, Nin Lilitu, shows up on 10 separate ledgers. She delivers cloth, receives silver, leases goats, and once filed a complaint about rough wool causing priestly itching. You copy her most recent tablet. Delivery of 3 robes, 2 dyed blue, 1 coarse. Payment requested in silver or fine flour. No onions. You admire her clarity. Minvolve tree. Midday brings a rush of deliveries. A porter drops off raw wool from the southern herders. Another brings in bundles of finished fabric meant for the temple store. There's a strange, elegant order here. Wool becomes thread, thread becomes fabric, fabric becomes robes, banners, temple decorations, offerings, and trade goods. And every step is tracked with a tablet. You help prepare a ledger for the next moon festival. It lists every expected item. 5 robes, white, 7 sashes, blue, 1 cloak, ceremonial, and 1 flag with the moon god's face, looking slightly less grumpy than last year. You raise an eyebrow at the note. "That's what the priest said." A weaver shrugs. "We aim to please." In a back room, you spot something unexpected. A stack of tiny tablets shaped like tags with holes for string. Textile receipts for individual garments. You run your fingers over one. 1 sleeveless tunic, fine weave, reserved for priest's niece. Do not misplace again. You take inventory of the dye stock while someone lists ingredients: lapis dust, indigo plant, crushed mollusks, and something described only as regrettably effective. The dye mistress hands you a note for the archive. "This batch turned out green. We were aiming for blue. Blame the moon." You accept this. The moon has been blamed for worse. Later, you sit with a merchant woman tallying her wool exports. She shows you 3 receipts from different temples: Ur, Lagash, and Nippur. "Their scribes don't cross their wedge marks," she complains. "Sloppy. I once sent 5 bolts of fabric and got paid for 4, and a sock." You offer to write her a cleaner receipt. She watches as you press each symbol with care. Your marks are neat, she says. Keep doing it like that and they'll give you a seal of your own someday. You pause. You've never thought about that. Your own seal. Your own tiny symbol carved into stone, pressed into clay, whispering, I was here. You finish the receipt and hand it over. Back in the weaver's room, you file the day's transactions into the archive. Deliveries logged, payments pending, disputes filed. One loom broke mid-shift and the argument over who sat on it last is still unresolved. The air smells of wool and stories. You jot one last note before leaving. Weavers, excellent memory, zero tolerance for missing bundles, and surprisingly good with threats. You mean that with the deepest respect, because if the temple rests on barley, silver, and livestock, it shines on fabric, colorful, soft, sacred, and every thread runs through this room. Today you're greeted at the scriptorium by something new, a fancy receipt. It arrives in a reed-wrapped bundle, tied with dyed string, a clear sign it's not just about grain or goats. When you peel it open, you find a clay tablet of unusually fine texture. It's smoother than usual, shaped into a gentle curve, and the wedge marks? Crisp, deep, confident. But the real star is the seal. Pressed carefully into the bottom is a gleaming, continuous cylinder impression. A lion battling a two-headed eagle, surrounded by swirling clouds, and... Wait, is that a tiny musician playing a harp in the corner? Yes. Yes, it is. You hold the tablet like it might start singing. This isn't your everyday temple receipt. This is high-status documentation. Probably a transaction involving a palace official or a major festival event. You check the inscription. Delivery of dyed woolen robes and polished obsidian, sealed by Megalana, overseer of offerings. Well then, fancy. Historians suggest that as Sumerian society became more complex, so did its paperwork. Official documents started including full seals, multiple witnesses, and even layered texts, meaning one inscription on the front, another on the reverse, and maybe a third tucked inside a clay envelope for extra drama. You've heard whispers of a particularly paranoid priest who once had his receipts sealed inside a bulla, then that bulla sealed inside a second clay shell, like a bureaucratic nesting doll. Today, you get to handle some of these multi-layered tablets. One is encased in a clay envelope. You gently crack it open, revealing the original tablet inside. Its wedge marks still crisp, despite being months old. It's a temple debt settlement between two scribes who once got into an argument about who borrowed whose stylus first. You admire the pettiness. Then there are the decorative seals. Some are pure art, crafted from lapis lazuli, hematite, and carnelian. Each is a unique identifier, carved with scenes of hunting, banquets, gods, animals, or the occasional oddity like person balancing fish on head. You've come to appreciate them like fingerprints, but with flair. You're asked to help log the temple's seal registry today, an index of everyone with an authorized seal and what theirs looks like. It's surprisingly revealing. Bazi, for instance, uses a seal showing a man drinking from a giant mug. Of course, Ninlilitu, the weaver merchant you logged earlier, has one with a delicate stylized goat standing beneath a tree. Elegant, precise. And Lil Bani's seal? A seated scribe surround. You also find a few abandoned seals, owners either deceased, exiled, or mysteriously vanished. One is tagged only as belonged to Lugal era, last seen arguing with kitchen priest, missing since barley dispute. You pause. The tablet has no follow-up. You record it as seal inactive, possibly cursed. Avoid reissuing. Later, a runner from the temple gate arrives with a delivery, a new trade agreement between Ur and a smaller nearby village. You read through it, 20 baskets of dates in exchange for a set of ceramic offering bowls. Straightforward. But the sender has included decorative flourishes in the text, curved wedges, doubled symbols, even an artistic border made of repeated reed patterns. You sigh. This is what happens when someone learns to write too well, you mutter. Still, you rewrite it into a formal format, apply the proper temple seal, and tag the original as archived flare copy. You hope no one asks you to read it aloud. You suspect it rhymes. You're also tasked with preparing a ceremonial receipt today, one that will be read during a lunar festival. It details an offering of goods, incense, oil, wool, and a gilded mirror to reflect the gaze of the moon god. You inscribe it slowly, pressing each wedge carefully into the clay, spacing the lines neatly. You add the ceremonial seal, a stylized moon face flanked by stars. Once dry, this tablet will be displayed beside the offerings, not buried, not stored, seen. And that's the beauty of these fancier receipts. They're not just about numbers. They're meant to be read, remembered, admired. Enlil Bani passes by, glancing at your work. Nice spacing, he says. Not too showy. Good balance. High praise. Near the end of the day, you spot a sealed tablet on your desk. No name, no markings. Curious, you open it. Inside is a simple line. 2 reeds. Given to the river in thanks. No need to log. You grin, and log it anyway, because even gratitude deserves a record. Today's assignment takes you deep into the temple's underbelly, a place few scribes go willingly, mostly because it's dark, stuffy, and smells like old barley and forgotten decisions. Welcome to the archive room. Not a archive room, the archive room. The room where records go not to die, but to wait, quietly, forever. You push open the heavy wooden door, stylus tucked behind your ear, and are immediately hit with a wave of warm, dry air and an eerie stillness. It's like stepping into the memory of the city itself. Clay tablets are everywhere, stacked in shelves, nestled in baskets, wrapped in cloth, and labeled with inscriptions like Goat Roster, Midwinter Audit, or Barley Distribution, Possibly Miscounted, see Dispute Tablet number 374. There are no windows. The only light comes from oil lamps, casting long shadows that make it feel like the tablets are watching you back. Your task today? Inventory. That's right. You've been asked to count the uncountable, to sort, match, file, and, when necessary, translate the mess of centuries-old bureaucracy. You pick up the first tray, sheep tax receipts from 5 years ago. Someone has bundled them by season, but there's a tablet missing. You glance around. On the shelf above, shoved behind a drying rack, is a lone tablet with a sheep doodle and the word late. You slot it back into place, satisfying. Sumerians didn't just store tablets randomly. Some used clay jars, actual filing jars, with rolled receipts inside like scrolls of stone. Others pressed symbols onto shelf tags to indicate categories. Triangles for livestock, circles for silver, crosshatches for grain. You spot a triangular tag and smile. Livestock shelf. Historians marvel at how systematic the Sumerians were. Even without paper or folders, they created an archival method that worked, at least until someone sneezed and knocked over a stack. You restack carefully. Some tablets are tiny, just 3 or 4 lines, quick notes. Others are massive, etched on thick slabs like the 10 Commandments' bureaucratic cousins. You find one such beast wedged under a basket. You heave it up, squint, and read. Inventory of the ziggurat kitchens, mid-festival. Notes: too much lentil stew. Complaints received. Offer dried figs instead. You log it, still relevant. There's also a shelf labeled Conflicts. It holds receipts related to disputes, everything from grain miscounts to temple dog bite accusations. One tablet reads, "Goat stolen, later found in stew. Owner compensated with 1 jug of beer. Considered resolved." You shake your head and smile. Sometimes the best part of the archives isn't what's written. Worker, Kuana, dug irrigation ditch, paid in grain and song. Worker, Ninmei, cleaned temple floor after feast, paid double, deserved it. Worker, Lugal, arrived late but with dates, forgiven. You sort them into folders, woven reed containers with hanging tags. Yes, file folders existed, or at least their ancient equivalent. One section of the room is clearly older. The clay is darker, heavier, the writing more primitive. You pick up a brittle tablet and nearly drop it. It's covered in early proto-cuneiform, barely recognizable. Likely from a time before proper grammar, when receipts were mostly symbolic stabs at, "I gave you this, you owe me that." You read it like a puzzle. Fish, temple, maybe. Yes? You tag it early abstraction and move on. Then there are the duplicates. Some scribes clearly didn't trust a single tablet. You find backup copies, some word for word, others with notes like, "This one is better," or "Ignore the first, this has the real barley count." You imagine future scribes arguing about which copy to believe. There's even a corner labeled misfires, broken tablets, spilled ink. Okay, spilled clay. One simply reads, "This was a mistake, please ignore." You do not, because even mistakes deserve archiving. Midway through the afternoon, you find a sealed clay box, rare. Inside are a dozen tiny tokens, shaped like cones, discs, and balls. Clay accounting markers, used before writing. You've read about them. Held like counters, each one meant a goat, a basket, a jar, the prequel to the receipt. You hold them in your palm and whisper, "Grandparents." You inventory them, wrap them back up and label the box. Token set. Very old. Very cool. Do not drop. You log each tablet you touch today, where it is, what it says, its status, intact, cracked, illegible, emotionally exhausting. And as you wrap up, you realize something strange. This room, dim, dusty, and overstuffed, is your favorite place in the city. It holds stories, mistakes, triumphs, petty disputes, and sacred offerings. It doesn't shout for attention. It waits. And when you walk through, reading the clay, the past answers. You place your final tablet on the shelf. It reads, "Checked and filed. Order restored. Mostly. Future scribes, you're welcome." You're outside today, perched on the edge of the ziggurat's sun-warmed steps, with a view of the city stretching wide before you. Ur's rooftops tiled with clay, smoke trails rising lazily from kitchen fires, and the glitter of the Euphrates cutting like a silver ribbon through the fields. You're not here to admire the view, though. You're here to close the books. Well, not books exactly, but the clay version. Because even though the work never truly ends, today marks the official end of the quarter. And that means it's time to prepare your final tallies, review open disputes, Close out accounts and, if possible, avoid bazi. Your job today is to compile the temple's summary tablet, a single thick slab that combines the most vital transactions of the past cycle. It's not every receipt, but it's every important one, a clay time capsule. You start by referencing your goat count, minus miku, your silver rations, the fabric logs from the weavers, and yes, even the beer ledger, which has 3 new additions from last week's particularly festive moon ritual. You carve each line carefully. Grain received, 318 full baskets, 5 partial, 1 suspiciously light. Silver weight, 24 minas, 3 shekels, 9 flakes. Livestock. See tablet number 144B. Notably, 1 goat missing, presumed mischievous. Labor rations. Distributed evenly, except for 1 request for triple beer, denied. You hesitate, then add a line. Weather. Wet. Flooded goat pen. Clerical panic contained. You seal the summary tablet with your official mark. Not your own seal yet, but Enlil Bani lets you press the scriptorium seal with your own hand. It feels significant, like a whisper of authority, of trust. And speaking of Enlil Bani, he appears beside you, holding an even older tablet. Thought you'd like this, he says, offering it up. It's crumbly, faded, but still legible. A receipt for 3 pots of lentils, issued over 2 decades ago. The name scratched at the top is nearly worn away. That was mine, he says. My first official tablet. They let me file lentils. Big day. You laugh, and I got goats and beer. He pats your shoulder. We all start somewhere. Lentils, goats. Eventually, they all blur together. You spend the next hour filing your final reports, sealing what's done, flagging what's unresolved. 1 sheep dispute remains open. The silver reconciliation for the southern warehouse is still pending, and the question of whether someone really sent a frog to the goddess Inanna as tribute will have to be dealt with next season. And as you step back, as the sun begins to slide behind the distant hills, the last light catches the seal you pressed, your seal borrowed or not, reflecting in a thin gold sheen across the clay. Receipts were invented to solve problems, but they end up telling stories of barley and beer, of moon festivals and missing goats, of a city that wanted the gods to know we kept track. We didn't forget, and neither will you. Now, as the moon rises over the rooftops of the noise of the day fades into soft murmurs, distant lyres playing, low voices laughing over barley beer, and somewhere the splash of water against stone. The scriptorium is quiet now, only the gentle creak of shelves settling, and the occasional whisper of a clay tablet cooling in the kiln. You sit alone, fingers dusted with clay, eyes tracing the shapes of words you've written and rewritten, symbols that once meant fish, goat, promise, debt, peace. The fire flickers low in its bowl, casting shadows that dance across the archive walls, and for a moment, time feels thinner. You can almost hear the voices of all those scribes before you, correcting a wedge, checking a seal, smiling at a miscounted sheep. It's comforting, knowing you're part of something long and lasting. You lean back, exhale slow, and let your mind drift, not to numbers or names or seal impressions, but to the steady rhythm of breath and the weight of time pressed into clay. You are here. You're careful. You told the truth, 1 tablet at a time, and that's enough. So close your eyes. Let the dust settle. Let the receipts sleep. You've earned your rest.